Jay, you provided the materials for the documentaries Before the Wrath. This is how I got to know who you were. I saw it on Prime, and Before the Wrath actually talks about the Galilean wedding. And last month we were talking about the Galilean wedding. And so it's such a big part of like learning and knowing and breaking down the history and understanding and God has gifted you that way. And I'm so glad. I'm going to put the link for that at the end of this video for the Galilean wedding and Jay's talk, and also in the description box. But today we focused on the documentary called Decoding the Future. But also now Jay tells me there's something else coming out. Jay, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, Brent has been working on this. Brent, the producer director who did Before the Wrath, finished the principal filming over 3 years ago down in Texas, where they've been filming The Chosen. So they've got this Middle Eastern village down there for another feature that is like Before the Wrath, but it's a whole different direction, and it's called Eating with the Enemy. It should be coming out sometime around this next November, but because it involves the Last Supper and some things that are, led up to it or offshoots of it, he decided not to release it around this past Resurrection Day, Easter week, because of The Chosen, because of the Last Supper movie, and a few other things related to it. It would just be, just too much. This one is radically different. It's taken from a presentation that I do that is called, I just call it a very unimaginative name, the Biblical Dinner. And Brent had sat through 6 of these before he decided he wanted to film it because he was trying to figure out how to do it. The Biblical Dinner is a recreation of what I do, is a recreation of the original Last Supper, the way it really would have happened, except I don't do the Seder part of it. I leave that to my Messianic friends who really have that down, and that's a really long thing. What I do is I pick it up approximately. I say approximately because there's a lot going on in the presentation, but approximately John 13, where after the Last Supper was the Passover elements were done, Jesus gives his disciples his last thoughts before they go out to the Garden of Gethsemane. I happen to be, I don't even want to say of the opinion, but the Bible, is pretty clear, and when it says something, it means something. I mean, it does. When they were done with John, Jesus is done with praying in John 17. They go out to the garden, and they leave to go to the garden, and that's when he's arrested. So the timeline there, even though John isn't always perfectly chronological, it wasn't the goal of a Galilean to be that way. They didn't think like us the way we compose things, but this seems to be very chronological. So that night, after the Passover, they would call it a celebration in those days. The elements were served and all of that. Jesus sits down and talks with him. But when you read the passage, we get all this theology, but all that theology was taking place around a particular table with the men sitting in a particular order that was traditional. And based on how it's described the way things happen, suddenly it's just packed with aha moments. When you understand things like foot washing, well, what was the basis of foot washing in those days? And boy, that's a whole discussion. We could spend an hour on that one, and I do in the presentation. I spend a good chunk of time on that. The shape of the table. We look at Da Vinci's painting and we say, man, well, that's a cool representation of the Last Supper. You look at all the other medieval artists; they're about the same way. A big long table, and everybody's on one side, like somebody said, "Let's take your picture." I mean, it's just kind of weird. But the real table was called a triclinium. It was a three-sided table just about 6 inches off the floor. It could even be on the floor if somebody couldn't afford to put a table together. They just put blankets out and meat around it. They didn't sit at the table. They never sat in chairs. Those were for kings and queens. They reclined at the table. And the host, there was a host, a bodyguard, a guest of honor, and a foot washer position at the table. And when you realize what happens, especially in John 13, and a little bit in Luke chapter 22, you realize that the shape of the table is critical to understanding what was going on at this event. And the real real core of the whole thing is the relationship Jesus had with two people at the Last Supper, Judas and Peter, and how the guys around the table in general had presumed that Jesus was going to be the conquering king. He was going to get the sword out, take on the Romans. There were going to be miracles because he'd already proven very well he could do lots of miracles. Now they're going to miraculously knock the Romans out, and which is why you find the disciples frequently carrying swords because they were the tough guys. Besides, guys like swords, so they're going to do that. But around the table, you've got Judas, who was in a very important position around the table. And when Brent films this, he'll show this actually where Judas was and the interaction between Jesus and Judas, and where Peter was in the interaction between Jesus and Peter. And Judas was in an honored position. Peter was in the worst seat in the house as far as a triclinium table goes, and yet Judas was the one who left and never came back. And Peter was the one who denied him shamefully. I mean, it was horrible what he did. It was in many ways, in the minds of ancient people, worse than what Judas did, or equally as bad anyway. But Peter, in the end, ends up coming back. And how does that work? And what does that happen? And what does that have to do with the church today, the modern church even? And it's really powerful stuff. And so he's made a movie out of that portion of it. It's not the whole biblical dinner, which when I do a college version of it, sometimes I'm asked to speak to college students on this thing. And it's a full sit down meal and everything. It's quite elaborate. But it can go, if they want me to go long, I can go 4 to 6 hours on it if you want to do that. And that's very easy to do. The book that I wrote, Broken Bread, Jesus, the Last Supper and Dinner with Judas, that's what the movie is partially based on. If he were to do the whole thing, it would be an epic miniseries. So he concentrates on the relationship with Jesus and Judas and Jesus and Peter. And what comes out of it is just positively mind blowing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Anybody out there that's interested in hearing more up from Jay, you can go to his YouTube channel, but he does have a website where you can get all of his books and resources that he's been talking about today. And you can get Decoding the Future, okay, and Before the Wrath, and the book Before the Wrath, the official book to hit the documentary. Jay, what would you like to leave my audience with today?
Don't complicate the Bible. The Bible is a revelation. In other words, it's a revealing. God is ringing back the curtains on this stage where he's saying, this is who I am. I'm revealing myself to you to the extent to which I want you to know me. And he does it in nature. He does it in miracles. He does it by the Holy Spirit. He does it in his scriptures. And of course, he does it especially in Jesus. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. He keeps it simple so that we can know him. And the most important thing in all of this, when you think about end times prophecy, when you think about reading the Bible, it's not to confuse us. It's so that we can know him. And I know there are different words in the Greek for know, but this one is the intimate knowing of friend to friend, heart to heart. He's revealed his heart and his mind, his intentions to us. He says, I want you to know me. That's the most important part. We overthink, again, with end times prophecy, this is that. Skip the this is that stuff and go straight to the end of the book and say, what's the whole outcome of this? We're going to be with Jesus. We're going to know as we are known. He loves you. And when we're going through especially hard times, which is really the one that comes up when we really start seeking the Lord, because I'm going through a hard time, the more you know him, the more you realize, he says, I know you're suffering, and I'm right here, and you know that too.
Don't forget to like and subscribe and share for more Christ-centered conversations. Visit the website, thecallwithNancySabato.com. Until next time, all glory and honor to King Jesus.